Well, good morning, team. Robbie and Dano coming to you this morning. And Robbie, there's no question the market's changed. You don't have to be Einstein to work that out unless you've been in a coma and you've just woken up and you've come out and the landscape's changed. Imagine if you did go into a coma.
That'd be a pretty quick one too. Like 3 or 4 weeks, it's been a shift.
Well,
sure.
if you went into a coma 12 months ago and you woke up today, you'd be in a very, very different, almost a different planet in terms of real estate. And part of our message this morning is to really just get everyone to understand that it's not happening to any of you individually.
And no individual market either. It's not like, because a few questions I've had have been, is it just the apartments? So I'm doing housing, but should I get an apartment? Are apartments moving better? But I think every market is affected.
And look, you can look at the person next door and they've done a few sales and this person's done a few sales and what am I doing wrong? Nothing. The market's changed for everyone. So it's not you. But the question is, we all know the market's changed for everyone, but not everyone's changed with the market.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point that we wanted to make to start with is if you're not adapting quickly, then it's going to get very ugly very quickly for your sellers and also for your sales volume, because right now is not the time to wind back prospecting activity. No. It's actually the total opposite of that. And I know that feels counterintuitive because when you've got 4 or 5 exclusives and there's hardly any interest and you're not selling them, buyers are thin on the ground, many opens with no one, 2, 3 people through if you're lucky, but many with none. It's very difficult psychologically to get yourself up to then want to go and replace the 4 or 5 or 6 more. The reason you've got to get more is because if the amount of buyers have diminished, if your stock base doesn't increase, then you're not attracting all those buyers. If there's a certain amount of transactions that are happening in the market, then you want to make sure that you give yourself every opportunity to be in line for those transactions. And how you control that is by controlling the stock.
And
to give you an example, go back 12 months ago, we had 400 listings online as a company, and we were doing around 50 to 60 sales a week. Now we've currently got around 600 listings online. We're doing around 30 to 40 sales a week. So that is a magnification of what might be going on in your business. If your stock base has decreased in this market, then you're already going to have a decreased volume of sales anyway. Then that's going to be even more of a decrease if you don't replace that stock. If you were dealing with 10 exclusives to sell 8 listings, you now need to be doing 20 listings to sell 6 or 7. So just to give you an idea, your stock base and your stock thermostat needs to go up in this market. And that's the first point we need to make.
I think one of the mistakes or traps you can fall into is thinking about the listings that you've currently got with the sellers that are kind of, up high, you're struggling to get them down, you're not wanting to go and thinking about, well, if I list more, I'm just going to have these problems. I think people that listed 2 to 3 months ago have an expectation of a premium that they want to get. People that are coming to market now, they're aware of what's going on in the market. So don't think that the listings that you're going to get today, your sellers are going to be the same as the ones that you've been holding for 2 or 3 months. Because I think the sellers that are coming onto market now, there's a reason that they're wanting to sell and they're aware of what's happening versus the ones that were coming on to get a premium. So
the people that came on 3 months ago that you were talking to months before that did so in a landscape where there wasn't as much heat taken out of the market.
That's
the people coming onto the market now are coming onto the market in the climate of post-budget. Fully aware.
So don't think that because they're saying they want a number, don't fall into the trap of not giving hope at the listing table, because I think a lot of people are kind of saying, well, if they're there, do I actually want them? A lot of sellers are making pretty big shifts. They still want a number, but they're not like hell bent on getting it.
You can go too far on the negative in this market at the listing, and you're absolutely right. One thing you can't do is you can't take away the hope at a listing presentation. Every seller has a God-given right to want a premium. If you take that away, you've got to be real. But at the same time, if you take away that hope, you might be actually also suffering from the saleable stock myth, because a lot of people think, oh, well, I spoke to them, they're too high. I told them what it was really worth. I missed the listing. And then 6 weeks later, it sells exactly where you said, less than what the other agent said, but it still sells, and you might be right, but you didn't get paid. So I just ask you to check yourself that you're not being too negative at the listing presentation. You've got to be real, but you've also got to make sure that you're giving a bit of hope.
Yeah.
The terminology that I would be using is we are now in a normal market.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be saying it's a bad market. It's actually not a bad market if you adjust. If you're pre 5 years ago, then you would have worked in a market like this. If you've joined the real estate industry in the last 5 years, this is probably going to appear to be what you would regard as a bad market. But newsflash, we've been working in an extraordinary time for the last 5 years. We are now entering normal times. This is not a headwind market yet. This is normal. Now, I know you might say, oh, well, but Dane, we're getting no one through. That's normal, right? That is a normal market. And you will return to a level, as Robbie said, when the sellers start to normalise, they start to get a little bit more realistic, as the next batch will. But our job is to make sure, even though you don't have inquiry, you're still actually communicating and you're still educating your seller, because a lot of people think they want buyers. You ask people around, the offices, and you say, well, what is one thing that would solve my business? And people will say, well, I wish I had more buyers.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is if you had market value delivered on all your stock, the question is, you had an offer at market value, and assuming that we're realistic on what that is, would your sellers actually be in a position where they would take it? Be honest. In a lot of cases, they wouldn't, because they're not ready. They haven't been educated to accept that offer.
And I think a good point with that is thinking about your stock, because I know a lot of people are thinking, well, even if we've got it priced right, there's still no buyers. Well, think about the price that you've got on it right now. Take 20% off, which is extreme, I know, but if you just took 20% off, would you be able to sell it? And you'd have to have a very high price listing to not have someone at 20% under, because there are people there. So it's not a case of there isn't anyone, there is, but it's just a case of getting your sellers right to be able to, realise those offers.
And let's discuss how you actually affect a sale, because for the last 5 years, the biggest determining factor in getting a property actually sold, was you list it, and ultimately the buyer would make the job easy. So the buyer would actually be the one to affect the transaction.
They'd make up the gap.
They would. Yeah. They would. And the reality is, the biggest determining factor now is the seller. So the seller's the one that needs to shift to actually, affect a sale. Now, when we have a seller and we list it, there's a little bit of education involved in the last market, but we're not talking black belt level education. We're talking yellow belt, brown belt. We're not talking elite levels of education. Right now, we have to become black belts at education. The challenge with that is, when you've got hardly any interest, how do you educate someone? You might remember Ptolemy did a session on this when the market was starting to change, and one of the points that came out of that was daily conversations. So talking to your vendors every day, even when nothing's going on, that builds trust.
But I think the thing that I loved, that when Tol and I did that session a couple of weeks ago as well, the thing that he said to remember is, you don't need to beat up your seller. It's the seller, you and me, we're over here. We're a team. It's the market over there. They're the ones that we're fighting. So you don't want to just go into combative with your seller, beat them up. You've got to make sure that you're here with them, working with them. It's the market that's there that's disappointing. We're doing what we can, but hey, that's where they're at. We're doing everything over here, so keeping that.
And the thing that I think we all need to understand is it takes weeks, not days and hours to educate a seller. You do not educate a seller with one conversation. You do not get an offer after the first week of opens and ring Rob and say, Rob, I'm 20% away here, 10% away here. Is there a script? There is no script. There is no line you can use to get a vendor who's here to here overnight. It doesn't happen. For a vendor to really fully process that their property is no longer worth that, it's now worth this, there needs to be process. And I'd suggest that most of us have thrown process away. Most of us don't do weekly written, fully reports followed by a face-to-face or even a Zoom meeting where we're actually eyeballing vendors and delivering feedback on price.
Yeah, not just sending it and hoping they receive it now isn't enough.
Text messaging, our buyer said this. I'm talking proper conversations where there's a disagreement. they think it's worth this, buyers think it's worth this, and there's a tension in that conversation.
Yeah.
If there's not regular tension in those conversations, then you're not affecting anyone.
No.
Nothing's getting moved.
And I think 2 words to think about when you're having those conversations are empathy and conviction.
Absolutely.
You need to empathize with, where they're at, what's going on, we're trying everything, but also conviction that, guys, as much as this is disappointing, this is where the market is. We have to deal with the reality of where that is. Like, if we were going to sell it tomorrow, sure, I know you're at 2.8, but realistically, at probably 2.5 is where we're going to get people. Like, you have to have the conversation with them.
We also need to return back to the auction process. And I know that the reason we auction properties in a rising market is we want to set records, we want to get over reserve. The reason we auction properties in this market is because it creates urgency with buyers, and it also gives sellers more visibility of what's going on in the marketplace. It creates urgency. So when I mentioned before that the seller creates the sale, so does the agent, because the agent is responsible for positioning the seller. And if you have an offer today, tomorrow, next week, that you know should buy a property and the seller rejects it, that's not the seller's fault. That's our responsibility for not having the right process. So we've got to really make sure that the process that we're recommending to a vendor is one that's going to make sure that they recognise, whether we have a buyer in week 1, week 3, week 4, that it is actually market value. Because if what we're doing isn't actually getting through and penetrating, and they're getting an offer in the first week and they're not taking it, the consequences of them not taking that offer in 5 weeks' time, 3 months' time, might be that it's less.
Yeah.
So we really need, as you said, conviction in our process. We need to really go towards it. We're auctioning now and we're processing. We're giving consistent feedback. We're not expecting to shift a vendor in a week. We're doing it over weeks, and we're just taking a step back and calming down, not panicking, and making sure that we do follow process. And if you follow process in this current market, I guarantee you in 3 months' time, you'll start to feel more in control. The sales will come as a result of doing the job, and you'll move. Robbie, my favourite quote at the moment is, when you see a storm, don't be frightened of the storm. You are the storm. And it's the old quote from Jim Mattis, the Defense Secretary of the US, the ex-Defense Secretary. Someone asked him as the Defense Secretary, what keeps you up at night? And his answer was classic. Nothing keeps me up at night. I'm the one that keeps other people up at night, or other countries up at night. And I think that's the mentality you've got to have in this market, is that you're not worried about the market changing, because you are the agent that's going to thrive in this market. You've got to forget what it was like. You've got to make the adjustments. If you make those adjustments in your process, then you know what? You are going to thrive.
And can I just say, going back to the auction thing, I think the critical thing to think about with the market that we're going into now is change the way that you pitch auction to the seller. So, because a lot of people will go in and be like, oh, auction, like, it's not working. Clearance rates are horrible. Like, why would we bother? Because auction to them is, like you said, creating urgency in a market where buyers have little. What we're looking to do is actually remove the theatre of the big auction. We're not expecting 5 or 10 registered bidders, but we do know that even with the clearance rate of 50%, we've got 1 in 2 buyers, or 1 in 2 chance of a cash unconditional contract within 30 days in a market that's taking between 60 and 90 days to get a sale. Not to mention, once they do sell, they're subject to finance, building and pest, falling over with all sorts of conditions where we can get it unconditional. So if we at least go down the path of expecting maybe we get one, maybe we don't, but at least at 30 days, we've given ourselves a chance to get a cash unconditional contract for you to make a decision. So take away the whole, we're doing this about a big event, we're going to have 10 registered bidders, because if you do that, you're going to feel like you're failing, and your seller's also going to say, well, what are we doing? You told us auction, no one's turned up. So pre-framing that in the listing presentation is going to help you overcome that objection and fear of auction for yourself and the seller.
And you really do have to watch your mindset and attitude in a market like this. As I said, you do have to forget what the market was like.
Yeah.
Because it was easier to sell a property.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue that it's now easier to list a property. Now, it has to be by definition, because if we've gone from 400 listings to 600 listings, there is more listing opportunities out there. There is no question. So my advice to you is really check your attitude over the next day, the next week. And if you're walking into the office and you're still carrying resentment about, oh, it's hard. There's no interest. Where's my next sale coming from? All relevant, understandable thoughts to have. But the reality is, you've really got to assume you've woken up in a new market and see the opportunity. We are, it's the old saying, if you don't like change, then you're going to like irrelevance even less, or
Talk about this.
extinction even less. And yeah, you're right, because the Formula One analogy, which is something we've spoken about, which Robbie mentioned in a previous podcast, where we talked about willingness to compete.
Yeah.
And it was one of those questions that Formula One drivers get asked every day when they're training is, out of 10, how is your willingness to compete? And they actually found that if your score was higher, then you would actually be more likely to go and do a great training session, because you do have to compete. You get out of your comfort zone. You've got to go in there and get in the fight. But the Formula One analogy in this market is every so often the Formula One
3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years. If you're a team in the Formula One, the governing body changes the specs and makeup of the engine. You effectively get handed a new engine. Environmental concerns, those kind of components, different power, whatever. So you may have got used to working with a certain engine. You may have even won championships with that engine, and then in 3 years' time, you get given a brand new engine, which all of a sudden isn't working as well as it was, and you've got to make changes. You've got to learn it. So it's not foreign to our industry that we have to adapt. It happens in all industries. So the question is, you can only do the best you can with the engine you're given in Formula One, right? Your job is to take the market we have, right, and do the absolute best that you can with it, and the results will look after themselves. So you've got to move away from almost being less result-driven now to being process-driven.
Yeah.
How can I be the best I can be in this market, and how does a world-class agent act in this market? They follow process. They don't carry sale prices of vendors like a monkey on the back, right? They don't carry that. They throw that back to the seller. I need this, Rob, to get to the next property. Irrelevant. The market doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
With empathy, of course. So I think that's a great.
But then
I think
have
that's
the
a great
confidence
answer.
to say, well, if that's what you need, I genuinely think you should probably think about staying, because the market isn't there. Like, I'll deliver it to you, but go when a door opens for you to have the conversation, go towards it. Don't get afraid. Don't step away from it.
And look, I have the experience. 48 years old now. Getting on.
You wouldn't know.
I know, you wouldn't know. Half Ironman.
Here we go.
Full Ironman. But I have seen different markets, and, go back to my very beginning of my career when I was an auctioneer, 1998, 1999. Then you go to 2000 when government did bring in negative gearing, and it happened. And then early 2000s, we had a run. And then, of course, that 05, 06 market absolutely cranking. And then on the other side of that, we had the GFC, right? 06, 07, 08, 09, lingered on, negative equity, huge upset in the market, huge change. What happens in those markets is people who stand up and actually deliver, the market leaders change.
Yeah, they do.
They change. So there is opportunity.
And quickly too.
Real quickly.
Yeah.
So if you've got a mentality, that you're going to use this opportunity to reposition yourself, either keep at number one and bridge the gap for second, if you are already number one in your market, but maybe take on another market, whatever it is. Or if you are sitting at number 3 or 4 and you're the up and comer, this is the market you've been praying for.
Yeah.
Because this is the market where things change. Now, I'm well aware that it's very easy for Robbie and I to say this. We're not listing and selling. We're not out there every day, but we're running a business, and we still get to see. We feel the effects of a downturn in the market probably more than anyone, because we see it over a broader scale. But there's no concern. There's no cause for panic, because we get excited about the opportunity of empowering our people to make sure that they can go out and really use this as a way to strengthen their market share. So when the market changes, and it ultimately does, you're actually way out in front of your competitors. So don't waste this opportunity. Again, work with the market you have. It's all we've got. Everyone's in the same boat.
Yep.
Forget the way it was. Don't take the monkey of price on board with the seller. Don't burst the hope bubble at the listing presentation. Walk into the office every day and become a process ninja, and you watch your business turn around. Let go of expectation. Start practicing gratitude. You're grateful for this market instead of resenting what we had. We've got to forget what we had. It's what it is now. Let's work on it. Let's make it amazing. Let's go, Robbie. Fire up.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.